We're talking about a direct psyche to matter connection,
exactly.
Not one that's mediated by the muscles.
Right.
Although one could argue that how do I, when I decide to raise my hand, isn't that psychokinesis also?
Yes, it is. I think it is.
Mind over matter?
Right. I think it is. And I talk about that in the book too, that we take it for granted. You know, every single thing that we see around us, this studio, everything is first in the mind. And it's like there's mind to matter. Because then we go, oh, well, that's nothing. You know, we have to come up with the tools. We have to come up with, and it's like, well, yeah. I mean, just lifting your arm, like you said, is a psyche to matter, you know, process.
But it's really amazing when it's not mediated by the muscles.
Not mediated by a physical mechanism.
Yeah.
And I think that's the distinction between these things that we look at as being paranormal. Because there is not a physical, material mechanism between the thought and the manifestation.
Yeah. One of the other examples you cite is the thoughtography of Ted Serios, which was investigated for many years by the psychiatrist, Dr. Jewel Eisenbud of Denver, who published a book on the work of Ted Serios. I know Stephen Browdy also took a strong interest in this case, and the archives are now housed in the library at the University of Maryland, Baltimore
which they were almost
County.
lost, as you know, which is like...
But once again, his mental impressions appear on Polaroid film. And of course, he was also accused of fraud.
Yeah, right. And in a way that, of course, just like with things, the phenomenon like the crop circles, you know, if one person comes up with a way to do a mediocre representation or manifestation through a mechanism, then everything else is wiped out. And, you know, the skeptics that attacked Ted Serios created their, oh, well, I can do this, completely under conditions that have, you know, none of the conditions that were set. Ted Serios.
No, if people study the Serios case, they'll find that many of the tests were conducted under such rigorous conditions.
Hugely so. So what is that? And, you know, and those are the examples I give that I think that we're all capable of manipulating matter in the same way, but in a controlled way. And maybe a more useful way if we want to, you know.
Well, Jewel Eisenbud, as I mentioned, was a psychiatrist and a Freudian. He published a book called Parapsychology and the Unconscious. And one of the things, though, that he did, and this is probably particularly relevant to Westerners, modern Westerners, is that he didn't want to encourage people to cultivate these abilities. He felt that they can come into the service of our own self-destructive impulses.
Well, when they're not disciplined. You know, I was just having a conversation with somebody in Toronto that has written a paper on imaginal reality. And we got into a discussion of the responsibility of taking the imaginal and presenting it as reality. And, you know, we can certainly cite things like schizophrenia. We can cite any of the psychoses, violent crime that the voices told me to kill these people. So there is a problem with that. But the conclusion really is that you have to be set, like the ancient Egyptians, to see this as a sacred endeavor, that it's governed by the rightness of the universe. Now, what is that? Who says what is right and what's wrong? Well, we used to rely on God and in our religions, and that's not as prevalent as it used to be, but that's where those kinds of moralities of what's right and wrong, we're certainly seeing a complete distortion of that in our culture now with fundamentalism. So I think the horse, you know, can't come before the cart, kind of. I mean, I think that we do have to develop other things within us before we just start deciding that we're going to have powers that we can change the material world and do it in a bad way.
Now,